locally renowned Abner Stone murder of a businessman in his own residence, the facts rapidly revealed approach to his wife Ember, setting up a controversy that may decipher a convoluted internet lies, betrayal, and twisted love triangles through the depths of mystery. Ember Stone, an attractive woman in her mid-30s, had always been the center of attention. Her before her marriage to Randy ended peacefully, or at least that's how Abner and present hubby had a strained bond with his younger sibling Veer. This strain, dynamic, hid deeper, additional sinister links that would come to light as the inquiry unfolded. The murder of Abner Stone was not a clear case. It was the catalyst that unveiled a complicated love triangle, revealing that everyone engaged have motivations concealed beneath layers of pretense and decorum. Detective Zuri and her partner, Detective Kelvin, would soon find themselves engaged in a lawsuit that rejected easy answers the night of the murder. Ember's screams pierced the calm neighborhood. The first responders arrived to the Stone residence to discover Ember in a condition of hysteria. Her garments smeared with blood. Abner's body lay sprawled on the living room floor, a large slash across his neck. Blood pooled surrounding him, dripping into the carpet. The scene was crazy, with furniture overturned and symptoms of a battle. Evident Officer Daniels, the first on the scene, swiftly secured the area. He spotted Ember, who was weeping wildly, holding a framed picture of her and Abner. Her hands shook as she attempted to explain what had transpired. "I found him like this. I returned home and he was simply lying there. I didn't know what to do." Her voice was unsteady, her eyes wide with terror. But there was something in her manner that didn't quite add up. She was too composed, too prepared. Detective Zuri arrived shortly after, her keen eyes absorbing in everything. She observed the lack of forcible entrance and the fact that Abner appears to have been taken off guard. It hinted that he recognized his assailant. Zuri's basic hunch reminded her that this was more than just a burglary gone bad. As the forensic team began their job, Zuri grabbed Ember aside for a more thorough statement. Ember described her day, carefully avoiding eye contact. She claimed to have been out shopping and returned to discover JN dead, but there were contradictions in her tale, little things that didn't align. Detective Kelvin joined Zuri, his expression grim. He had talked with the neighbors, who reported hearing loud shouts early in the even nightfall. None could identify the second voice, yet it was evident that Abner had not been alone before his death. Zuri glanced at Kelvin. "This isn't a simple case, Kelvin. There's more to this than meets the eye." Kelvin nodded in accord. "Leighton, explore further. Something tells me we're merely scraping the surface." The investigation into Abner Stone's murder began off in earnest the next day. Detectives Zuri and Kelvin began their laborious procedure method, obtaining evidence and conducting interviews. The first step was to develop the chronology of Abner's final hours. They learned that Abner had left his workplace about 5 p.m., a bit early then. Typically, his assistant remarked that he seemed concerned, nearly disturbed. Ember's account put her at the local mall during this period, yet there were no security camera records. To corroborate her presence, Detective Zuri focuses on Ember's behavior. She appeared cooperative. Nonetheless, there was an underlying current of tension. While questioning, Ember maintained her tale, but frequently glanced at her phone as if anticipating a message or contact. Zuri made a mental note to investigate her phone records as Kelvin looked into Abner's career life as a successful real estate developer. Abner has made a couple enemies, business rivals, and unhappy past employees. Composed a list of prospective candidates, however, none seemed must have a motive strong enough for murder. When they delved deeper, the detectives learnt more about Ember's past, her before her marriage to Randy terminated. 5 years ago, the divorce was agreeable, on paper. Yet whispers of infidelity and financial disputes lingered. Randy had moved out of town but returned occasionally, supposedly to visit his daughter from another romance. Detective Zuri decided to pay Randy a visit. He lived in a humble apartment on the outskirts of Willow Creek. Randy was a tall, brooding man with a rustic charm. He seemed truly astonished when Zuri informed him of Abner's murder. "Ember contacted me yesterday night," he said, his voice tainted with worry. "She was frantic, stated Abner was dead. I advised her to contact the cops, and immediately I ran over. But by the time I got there, the place was swarming with officers. Randy's alibi was wobbly, yet there was no substantial evidence tying him to the crime." Zuri observed his reaction and chose to keep him under surveillance back at the station. Kelvin had unearthed a fresh lead. Veer Stone, Abner's younger brother, had been spotted bickering with Abner numerous days before the murder. Veer, a charming but aimless guy, has always lived in his brother's shadow. He carried a profound anger towards Abner, caused by jealousy and financial dependence. Veer was taken in for questioning. He was clearly nervous, his eyes darting around the room while he talked. Abner and I disagreed regarding money. He acknowledged he was going to cut me off, but I didn't murder him. The cops were doubtful. Veer's alibi for the night of the murder was feeble. He claimed to have been in a bar, but no one could confirm his existence as they continued to press him. Veer's tale began to uncover Ember's suspicions, behavior, Randy's unsteady alibi, and Veer's deep-seated animosity produced a tangled web. The investigators understood they were dealing with more than simply a crime of emotion. There were layers of deceit and secret intentions that needed to be pulled back one by one. Abner and Ember Stone looked to be the typical suburban couple. They had a gorgeous home, a successful business. They were well liked in their community because beyond the shell of their immaculate life fissures were beginning to show. Abner has created his real estate empire from the ground up. He was noted for his business acumen and cutthroat bargaining tactics. Yet his professional success comes at a personal cost. Abner's demanding, busy schedule left little time for his marriage, causing a breach between him and Ember. Ember, on the other hand, had a more complicated past. Reared in a rich household, she was used to a life of privilege. Her first marriage to Randy had been a whirlwind romance. Randy was a dynamic entrepreneur, yet his commercial undertakings often ended in failure. Their relationship was passionate but chaotic, defined by frequent disputes and infidelity. The divorce had been acrimonious, with Ember accusing Randy of cheating and financial mismanagement. Randy in turn alleged that Ember's spending habits had led him to the verge of bankruptcy. Notwithstanding the acrimony, they managed to part ways without too much public scandal. Randy left town, but he never fully terminated connections with Ember. Abner joined Ember's life shortly after her divorce. He gave stability and security, something she desperately needed. Their courtship was swift and they married within a year. Despite the transition from a chaotic relationship to a secure one was not easy for Ember. She missed the exhilaration, this volatility, that Randy had welcomed into her life. Veer Stone, Abner's younger brother, was another important player in the unfolding drama. Veer had always been the black sheep of the family. He fought with numerous addictions and had a succession of unsuccessful business initiatives. Abner frequently bailed him out, providing a sense of dependence and resentment. Veer's connection with Ember was difficult. They had an unmistakable chemistry, and their interactions were typically charged with hidden tension. Ember confided in Veer, revealed her marriage issues, and he in turn found consolation in her presence. It was evident to the detectives that there was more to their relationship than met the eye. When Zuri and Kelvin probed deeper, they realized that Abner had lately made some important financial actions. He had taken up a substantial life insurance policy and transmitted considerable assets into Ember's name. These activities indicating that Abner was either planning for the future or anticipating something. Unfortunately, Ember's spending habits had also come under scrutiny. Despite her outward look of anxiety and anguish, her bank data indicated huge withdrawals and unexpected costs. The detectives began to suspect that she could have been intending to leave Abner and start a fresh existence abroad. Randy, though, seems out of the picture, nonetheless harboring thoughts for Ember. He had lately came back into town and had been observed meeting with her on multiple. Sometimes, their interactions were pleasant on the surface, but there was an undertone of unresolved tension and silent phrases. The background checks created an image of a marriage on the brink, with each character hiding their genuine objectives beneath a facade of normally. Abner was the pillar of the community, Ember, the perfect wife, Veer, the troublesome brother, and Randy, the ex-husband with residual affections. But as the investigators would soon learn, looks might be misleading. As the investigation proceeded, the detectives' focuses on discovering the causes underlying Abner Stone's murder. Each of the primary players had motivations, both concealed and overt, that may force them to such a severe deed. Ember's financial difficulties were the most evident. Notwithstanding Abner's success, their funds were stripped, Ember's luxurious lifestyle had placed them in substantial debt. The enormous life insurance coverage Abner has lately taken out added a sinister layer to this financial worry. If Ember were to profit from Abner's death, it would solve all her money troubles. Ember's affair with Veer muddled matters further. Their friendship was more than simply an ephemeral romance. It was a very emotional bond, born out of mutual discontent and reliance. Randy also had a reason his lingering feelings for, and the unresolved animosity from their divorce creates an explosive mix. Randy's financial instability made him prone to desperate tactics. His frequent trips to Ember indicated a rekindled friendship, which may have easily twisted as a plot against Abner. Veer's hatred towards his brother was clearly established. He had lived in Abner's shadow for much of his life, dependent on him for financial assistance. The dispute they had days before the murder based on money and power. Abner had threatened to cut Veer off, a move that would leave him destitute. Veer's dependency on Abner generated a deep-seated loathing that may have pushed him to murder. The detectives also considered the potential of a cooperative effort between Ember and Veer. Their affair combined, with their financial motives making them prime suspects. If they plotted together, they could both gain enormously from Abner's death. Hailey would obtain financial freedom, and Veer would free himself of his brother's dominance. One evening, Detective Zuri received a call from a local bartender who claimed to have seen Ember and Veer together. On the night of the murder, according to the bartender, they seemed to be in an intensive chat, their body language implying more than simply a casual meeting. This fresh knowledge put both Ember and Veer at the site of the crime around the predicted time of death. Zuri and Kelvin brought Ember in for additional interrogation. Faced with the bartender's testimony, Ember's composure began to break. She confided to meeting Veer, but maintained they were about her difficult marriage and had nothing to do with Abner's death. Veer, on the other hand, was less forthcoming when questioned about his location. He got cautious and evasive. His alibi, which had previously been feeble, now looked even more doubtful. The detectives questioned him on his connection with Ember and the nature of their talk that night, but Veer stuck to his narrative of innocence. Randy also remained a person of interest. His regular trips to Ember, paired with his financial difficulties, made him a viable suspect. In the middle of these revelations, the detectives encountered numerous red herrings. One such distraction arrived in the form of an anonymous report stating that Abner was engaging in unlawful activity. The tip stated that Abner had been laundering money through his real estate business. While this advantage first looked promising, additional study revealed it to be baseless. It looked to be a purposeful attempt to deflect the detectives' attention from the true motivations for the murder. Another false tip came from an irate former employee of Abner's. The employee had a history of making threats against Abner and had been sacked under disputed situations. Nevertheless, after a comprehensive inquiry, it became obvious that he had no participation in the murder. His threats were only idle phrases born out of rage and hatred. The turning point arrived when Detective Kelvin uncovered a string of text messages between Ember and Randy. The communications indicated a rekindling of their romantic connection and discussed intentions to meet secretly. One message in thing stood out, sent on the day of the murder. It read, "We need to act tonight, Abner. Can't find out." Equipped with this fresh proof, Zuri and Kelvin faced Ember and Randy separately. Ember broke down under the pressure, partially confessing to the affair, but admitting any role in the murder. Randy nonetheless maintained his innocence, arguing that the texts were taken out of context. The breakthrough in the case came when Detective Zuri decided to have a closer look at the phone documents and financial transactions. She felt that this would supply the substantial proof required to tie the suspects to the crime. The phone records revealed a rush of calls and mails between Ember, Veer, and Randy. In the days leading up to the murder, the communication pattern suggested a joint effort with Ember at the center. On the night of the murder, there were multiple calls between Ember and Veer, as well as a quick call to Randy. This triangulation of communication placed all three suspects in contact. At the key hours, Zuri also detected a strange transaction in Ember's bank account. Big quantity of money had been moved to an offshore account only days before Abner's death. This trade, paired with the life insurance coverage, indicated that Ember was ready for a huge change in her financial condition. Equipped with given fresh evidence, the detectives decided to confront Ember once again. This time they handed her with the phone records and the financial transactions confronted with irrefutable proof. Ember's facade of innocence began to shatter. Ember's voice trembled. "When she talked, I didn't want it to come to this. I simply wanted out." Abner was controlling suffocation. "I needed a method out, but I never wanted him dead." Zuri pushed further. "Who did you talk to that night, Ember? Why were you and Veer in touch so regularly?" Ember hesitated, her eyes welling with tears. "Veer and I, we had a plan. We were going to leave Abner, start over. Yet I promise we never intended to murder him." The investigators knew they needed to hear Veer's side of the tale when they brought him in for questioning. Veer first denied any participation. Yet when presented with the phone documents and Ember's partial confession, his resolve weakened. Veer acknowledged to seeing Ember on the night of the murder, but maintained that their purpose was solely to confront Abner, not to hurt him. Ember had assured him that Abner would never let her leave and that they needed to make him comprehend that their relationship was over. Randy's participation grew obvious as the detectives studied his financial documents. They discovered that he had got a huge sum of money from an unknown source quickly following Abner's death. This payment, coupled as the SMS text, suggested that Randy was part of the plot. The detectives agreed to bring all three suspects gathered together. In a stressful confrontation, they handed out the evidence. Ember's collapse, Veer's anxiousness, and Randy's defiance generated a volatile atmosphere. Zuri addressed them. "We know about the affair. We know regarding the money. It's time to come clean. Who killed Jay and Ember?" Tears running down, her face finally revealed it was an accident. "We faced Abner. Things got heated and Veer lost control. He didn't mean to murder him." Veer's face paled as he mumbled, "It was self-defense. Abner assaulted me, and I simply reacted. I didn't want it to end this way." Randy, comprehending the magnitude of the situation, added, "I was meant to aid them vanish after I never believed it would get this far." The detectives had the parts they needed. The conflict had grew violent, resulting to Abner's accidental death. Ember and Veer had terrified, and Randy had stepped in to assist, cover it up. The murder was a tragedy, result of a plan gone tragically wrong. Having the confessions in hand, the investigators realized they had found the fact. The matter was far from straightforward, but the tangled motivations and relationships had now come to light. The truth was a web of love, treachery, and desperation. The ultimate encounter with Ember, Veer, and Randy signified the climax of weeks of rigorous inquiry. Detectives Zuri and Kelvin had fit together the complex puzzle of Abner Stone's murder. The courtroom was packed as the trial of Ember, Veer, and Randy created. The community of Willow Creek, previously noted for its tranquility, was currently a hotspot of media interest. Reporters and spectators both were excited to hear the categorized information of the case that had shocked the town. The prosecutors develop an engaging narrative. They recounted how Ember's romance with Veer had reignited old passions and how their friendship had become a desperate escape from her restrictive marriage. The prosecution contended that the financial difficulties and the life insurance policy developed a solid motivation for murder. Ember's defense counsel sought to depict her as a victim of circumstances, a lady imprisoned in a loveless marriage who made incorrect judgments at a time of terror. They highlighted that the murder was unplanned, and that Ember had no intention of murdering her husband. Veer's defense focusing on self-defense. They highlighted Abner's violent demeanor and his attack on Veer, saying that Veer had acted out of fear for his life. They depicted him as a guy pushed to his breaking point by years of familial turmoil and resentment. Randy's defense was the most straightforward. They asserted he had no previous knowledge of the murder scheme, and that his involvement was confined to assisting Ember. Out of mistaken allegiance, he was represented as an unsuspecting accomplice caught up in a scenario beyond his power. Throughout the trial, the detectives' diligent work came to light: the phone records, financial transactions, and confessions. They painted a vivid image of the events leading up to Abner's death. The jury listened carefully as the prosecution and defense presented their cases on the stand. Ember was a picture. With remorse, she described the night of the murder in vivid detail, her voice shattering when she told the encounter with Abner. Tears poured down her cheeks as she talked of her remorse and dread. "I adored Abner," she said, her voice shaking, "but I felt trapped when Veer, as I confronted him, everything spiraled out of control. I never wanted this to happen." Veer's testimony was similarly emotional. He recounted the years of dwelling in Abner's shadow, the continuous sense of inadequacy, and the moment of terror when Abner assaulted him. "I just wanted to protect myself," he stated, his voice breaking. "I never meant to murder him. It was an accident." Randy, in his testimony, acknowledged to assisting Ember cover up the crime, but said he had no role in the actual killing. "I created an awful error," he remarked. "I thought I was aiding a buddy. Yet I see now how incorrect I was." The prosecution's closing argument was compelling. They stressed the premeditation involved in the affair. Considering the financial considerations, they advocated that, although the murder might not have been precisely arranged, it was the outcome of a series of planned activities taken by Ember and Veer. Thanks for watching True Crime Cases.